The time is now for the Dr. Bob Sports Podcast. I am Tanner. I am our head of analytics, and I am in my 8th year working alongside Bob to originate our NFL and college basketball bets. And today, as always, I am joined by our digital media specialist, Grant. College football is back.
Yes, it is. I'm fired up to have college football back. And reminder, Tanner talked to Bob last week about a couple of the college football win totals that we had released. So if you're watching this before week 1 kicks off, make sure to tune in and get those bets in. And Bob also has a ton of the free weekly analysis already on for week 1. So head over to the site at drbobsports.com to check those out.
Yeah, and we also had our first NFL release of the season earlier this week, and we should have more week 1 bets coming. So if you're looking to sign up for the 2024 season, now is the time. So on this podcast, we'll touch on fantasy advice. We will share a futures bet later in the show, but let's go ahead and dive into the team previews.
Alrighty, so we are going to start here in Kansas City with the Chiefs coming off that 11-6 season, and the back-to-back Super Bowl champions had a rather shaky regular season by their standards. I mean, they suffered on offenses. They didn't have a receiver that could really catch the ball consistently, but this defense was elite last season, and they still found a way to take down Miami, Buffalo, Baltimore, and San Francisco to secure another ring. So their 2024 win total is set at 11.5.
So much can change if you go on a Super Bowl run. You remember the Chiefs were held to just 14 points by the Raiders on Christmas, and the offense rated 8th in market heading into Week 17, nearly a point below the Eagles. So you see, if the Chiefs had bowed out of the playoffs early like Philadelphia did, we would be looking at this as one of the most disappointing offenses of the season. But instead, they win the Super Bowl, and most people forget about what happened last regular season.
Yeah, and they've made moves this offseason to address the weaknesses, mainly the wide receivers. I mean, in hindsight, it is crazy to think this team went into last season with MVS, Sky Moore, and Justin Watson leading the team in routes for the first month of the season.
And eventually, rookie wide receiver Rashee Rice came onto the scene. He doubled his target share from Week 12 onwards and ultimately finished 10th among all wide receivers in yards per route run.
Yeah, and then they drafted Xavier Worthy in the first round, and then they signed Marquise Brown, who just suffered that collarbone injury on August 11th, but he should be back sometime in September. And earlier this week, they also brought back wide receiver Juju Smith-Schuster, who averaged 9.2 yards per target with this team just 2 years ago.
Yeah, I don't expect Juju to get 100 targets again in this offense, but it speaks to the never again mantra from GM Brett Veach. He does not want this receiving group to be the reason that Patrick Mahomes struggles, kind of, like we saw with the offensive line when they rebuilt that after the Buccaneers Super Bowl. He wants a ton of depth in this receiving group, also because I don't think he can count on Travis Kelce to finish 4th among tight ends in success rate heading into his age 35 season. I'm not expecting much from Kelce in the regular season. I could see his targets dip below 100 for the first time in a decade. They know they need Kelce fresh for January, and now they have the receiving depth to not overextend their all-pro tight end.
For sure. And Kansas City's interior offensive line was at fault for the second lowest percentage of pressures in the NFL last year, thanks to center Creed Humphrey, now the highest paid center in the NFL, and also all-pro guard Joe Thuney.
Yeah, the tackles, though, were a little bit more shaky, particularly on the left side with Donovan Smith, who graded 10th worst in pass blocking grade by PFF on True Set. So the Chiefs are hoping second-round pick Kingsley Suamataia will be an upgrade for them on that left side.
And Kansas City's offense has averaged at least 28 points per game in every season Patrick Mahomes has been the starter, up until last season's 21.8 points per game. So do you think they've done enough in this offseason to kind of get them back to their old ways?
Well, the market has this offense rated 3rd heading into the season behind the Lions and 49ers. I'm going to trust Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid a little bit more and start them ranked 2nd with a clearly improved group of receivers and an offensive line that should be better.
Yeah, I think this could turn back kind of to their old style of ball, but let's move over to the defense here. And what are you seeing with the Chiefs?
I'm not as optimistic about Kansas City's defense. The reason they were so elite last season is because they were able to take away what you wanted to do in your passing offense. They conceded a league low 44 yards per game to opposing wide receiver ones. But now they lose all-pro cornerback L'Jarius Sneed, who is basically the reason they were able to do that. Now, Steve Spagnuolo has shown a good history of coaching up young cornerbacks, but it just seems impossible to me. Guys like Joshua Williams, Chamari Connor, Nazeeh Johnson are going to be able to come close to the production they got from L'Jarius Sneed last season.
Yeah, and the Chiefs led the NFL with 2 high safety coverages on 63% of snaps, but now starting safety Mike Edwards is gone, and safety Brian Cook did play 593 snaps last season, but they don't have the depth of the position anymore to play those dime looks that they like to deploy occasionally.
Yeah, so, I mean, the secondary, it's going to be a lot worse. Now, the defensive line still led by all-pro defensive tackle Chris Jones, who ranked second in pressures in 2023. And edge defender George Karlaftis made a major leap in his second season. He finished 16th in pass rushing efficiency. But they did take a hit in that AFC title game. They lost Charles Omenihu to a torn ACL. He had a 12% pressure rate for them last season. So they're really going to need last year's first-round pick, FAU, to step up in a big way. So we think the offense is going to be better. So Spags is going to be playing with more leads. And that's enough for me to keep this defense ranked in the top 10. But it's very unlikely to me that they finish second in scoring like they did last season.
All right, well, let's shift it over to our next team. We've got the Los Angeles Chargers coming off that 5-12 season. I mean, this was just a miserable final year for Staley. The team was just 4-4 before going on to lose 8 of 9 to end the year, and they did suffer from injuries, as it felt like this team kind of always does, but they also just seemed like they quit on their staff. But now they've brought in college football champion Jim Harbaugh. He's back in the NFL, and they have a reason to be optimistic about the future. And their win total for 2024 is set at 8.5.
And it was an eventful offseason in Los Angeles. They did not bring back Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, Gerald Everett. Those were the top 3 on this team in targets last season. 294 targets out the door. And they lose Mike Williams, who was their number 2 receiver, and he tore his ACL in week 3.
Yeah, I think everyone was kind of thinking they're going to go wide receiver at the 5th pick, but Jim Harbaugh said, nope, we're going with Joe Alt instead. Yeah,
and Chargers, I mean, they felt like it's easier to find good receiving production later in the draft than elite tackle production. So I can kind of see why they made the move there. And they did end up taking wide receiver Ladd McConkey in round 2, who should be set up for a massive workload in his rookie season.
Yeah, and the other 2 starting wide receivers are Josh Palmer and DJ Chark, because last year's first-round pick, Quentin Johnson, has been a bust so far, averaging just 0.88 yards per route run as a rookie.
Yeah, and free agency, the Chargers had to take their medicine after fired GM Tom Telesco's all-in moves these last couple of years. They really couldn't do much. I mean, the biggest deal they gave out was tight end Will Dissly signing for 3 years, $14 million. I kind of like the Will Dissly signing. He's kind of a blocking tight end, but capable receiver as well, averaging 1.44 yards per route run in his career, and he should be perfect for this Greg Roman power rushing scheme.
Yeah, I think the concern with the ground game, though, is they have to go a long way after ranking 30th in our rushing metrics of last season.
Yeah, it's going to have to be a big jump. If they want to make this their identity, they're going to have to be a lot better. They bring in Bradley Bozeman at center and the aforementioned Alts to play tackle, but otherwise it's 3 of the same starters on the offensive line. And the running backs they brought in looking like they might be washed. I mean, Gus Edwards has benefited from playing with Lamar his whole career. He averaged 5.2 yards per carry in his first 4 seasons until last year. He dropped off. He gained just 4.1 yards per rush. Then maybe it's J.K. Dobbins, but he's working back from a September's Achilles tear, and it was his second significant injury already as a pro following the multi-ligament left knee injury back in 2021.
Yeah, they might need someone else to step up in there, but they also probably need Justin Herbert to be involved in some read option stuff that Greg Roman likes to use in the run game. But now he also has an injury with the plantar fascia in his right foot, and then that could linger all season long.
It could, yeah. So, I mean, the market has responded to all of this. They currently have the Chargers offense rated 20th after Market Prior's last offseason had this unit in the top 5. So, I mean, it's hard to say how bad a Justin Herbert offense can be, right? He's one of the top five-ish quarterbacks in the NFL. So saying the offense is going to be below average is quite the step. It really might come down to just how comfortable he is with that foot injury you mentioned.
Yeah, 100%. Well, looking at the defense, I mean, it's mostly the same with minor like-for-like swaps. I mean, Eric Kendricks for Denzel Perriman at linebacker, and then Michael Davis for Christian Fulton at cornerback.
Yeah, the major difference this year on defense will be in aggressiveness, switching from Brandon Staley calling the plays to Jesse Minter, who was with Jim Harbaugh at Michigan. Now, there's pros and cons to this switch, but I think a major advantage will be unlocking safety Derwin James. James was an all-pro as a rookie. Then he got hurt in year two. He's never really been able to recapture his production in Brandon Staley's system. I mean, you look at it, James graded 53rd in coverage grade by PFF last year out of just 63 qualifying safeties.
Yeah, the other strength of this defense is an edge rusher. I mean, you have Khalil Mack, Tuli Tuipulotu, and then Bud Dupree, who combined for 177 pressures in 2023. And then you got Joey Bosa, who's been out most of the last 2 years, but he's made a Pro Bowl in every healthy season of his career.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm just trying to think about how to set a rating on this Los Angeles defense. They were rated a half point better than average heading into 2023. Basically the same talent. We talked about the minor switches at off-ball linebacker and cornerback, but I think the scheme probably fits their personnel better. So I think you have to rank this defense above average heading into 2024.
All right, let's shift it over to our next team. We've got the Las Vegas Raiders coming off that 8-9 season. And after a 3-5 start, the franchise decided to fire head coach Josh McDaniels and GM Dave Ziegler. And there was a fire lit under this team after they switched coaches. And it was honestly impressive that they got to 8-9 with a fourth round rookie quarterback. So 2024, they're rocking with head coach Antonio Pierce and a win total set at 6.5.
Yeah, and Antonio Pierce got the job in large part because the players wanted him to get the job. And they did have that upset win over Kansas City on Christmas. But it's important to remember the Raiders were rated nearly 4 points worse than average in market even after that upset win. The offense ended the season ranked 26th in the market. And I don't think they really did anything better to get better besides drafting Brock Bowers.
Yeah, and Gardner Minshew certainly didn't definitively win his QB job. I mean, Pierce seemed pretty reluctant to give it to him, and Pierce said, quote, myself, Tom Telesco, and Luke Getsy discussed it. A lot of things went into it, and it wasn't based off last night, end of quote. And he was referring to Minshew's 10 for 21 outing in preseason week 2.
Yeah, so I'm operating under the assumption that Minshew and Aiden O'Connell are basically a wash. They're giving Minshew the first shot at it because they gave him that deal in the offseason, but it could get frustrating out there for guys like Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers. And they're worse along the offensive line, losing 2 starters in Jermaine Illuminor and Greg Van Roten, the latter of which ranked 9th in pass blocking efficiency, which rookie Jackson Powers Johnson will not be able to match. And then you look at right tackle, Thayer Munford backed up Illuminor last season, and he surrendered a 10% pressure rate compared to Illuminor's 5% pressure rate allowed.
All right, so where are we going to start this offense and our priors?
Well, I don't think the additions of Minshew and Bowers compensate for the downgrades along the offensive line. And Luke Getsy isn't going to make any major impact with schematic advantages. He's a replacement level offensive coordinator. So I'm going to start this offense slightly lower than where they finished last season, ranked 28th.
Yeah, I think things are a little bit more optimistic on this defense after handing out the 5th largest deal of free agency.
Yeah, Patrick Graham's unit finished the season ranked 0.7 points worse than average. And now they've added Christian Wilkins, like you mentioned. He got that deal because he ranked 9th in pressures and 20th in run stops among interior defenders. And he will be a major threat alongside Max Crosby, who had 14 sacks and led all edge defenders with 38 run stops. The other edge seems like Tyree Wilson is a bust at this point, but Malcolm Kuntz was efficient when given opportunities. He finished 11th in pass rushing efficiency. This defense finished 20th in pressure rate last season. I expect them to be a borderline top 10 pass rush now with Wilkins on the field. However, This secondary is rated 30th in our metrics, which keeps this defense from being above average to start the season in our priors.
All right. Well, let's shift it over to our next team. We've got the Denver Broncos coming off that 8-9 season and just a brutal 1-5 start until they rattled off 5 straight wins against good teams actually in the middle of the season, but they ended up losing 4 of 6 to end the year. And Sean Payton told Russell Wilson to pack his bags, and the team went and drafted a new potential franchise QB with Bo Nix, and they've got a 2024 win total set at 5.5.
Yeah, so looking at what Bo Nix did at Oregon, that offense was second best in the nation behind LSU. The Ducks averaged 41 points on over 500 total yards per game, 7.8 yards per play when Bo Nix was in the game against FBS opponents that would combine to allow just 5.3 yards per play to an average offense. So Nix was very good last year in college.
Yeah, I think the critique is he threw 38% of his passes behind the line of scrimmage, but he also had 23 completions on passes with at least 20 plus air yards.
Yeah, I'm not sure he was worth the 12th pick in the draft. I think if I was Denver and I really liked Bo Nix, which it seems like Sean Payton does, I might have traded back there and taken him at the end of the first round. But I do think he's going to be able to operate this offense close to the effectiveness that Russell Wilson did last season.
For sure. But there's only 2 other main changes to the offense, and the first is on the offensive line losing center Lloyd Cushenberry.
And Cushenberry ranked 8th in pass blocking efficiency on true sets last season. He's worth about 0.4 points over the new starter, Luke Wattenberg, who has allowed 3 sacks on just 71 pass blocking opportunities so far in his career.
Yeah, and the change in the receiving corps will be swapping out Jerry Jeudy with Josh Reynolds and Tim Patrick, who missed each of the last 2 seasons after tearing his ACL in the summer of 2022, and then he had a torn Achilles in training camp the following year.
Yeah, and I think those two should be able to replace Judy's production, which was only 1.65 yards per route run because Russ couldn't get him the ball over the middle of the field where he thrives. So you look at it, Reynolds had a 58% success rate last season. That was 23rd among all receivers. Tim Patrick has looked promising in training camp thus far, and he's averaged 1.48 yards per route run his last full season before those injuries you talked about.
All right, so where are we going to start our rating for this Broncos offense?
Denver's offense was 2 points worse than average in market last season, and the downgraded center that we talked about brings them to a negative 2.4. I don't think this quarterback difference is worth much more than a few tenths of a point. So I'm going to start Denver's offense ranked 26th ahead of teams like Las Vegas because I believe in Sean Payton, who's put out effective offenses with just about every type of quarterback, and he handpicked this one.
Yeah, they should be interesting, but let's look at the defense. I mean, they had that horrible game. They surrendered 70 points to Miami in September, but they got themselves up to near league average by the end of the season.
Yeah. Market had them ranked almost exactly league average at the end of the year. Now, there's going to be a drop-off without 4-time All-Pro safety Justin Simmons. He's out the door. The defense also loses Josie Jewell, but they replace him with an equally capable off-ball linebacker in Cody Barton. So Denver also adds John Franklin Myers, had 50 pressures last season, but it remains to be seen whether he'll be able to sustain that kind of production without all the other horses on that Jets defensive line surrounding him. There's not really any stars or any mid-level talent on this unit outside of Patrick Surtain. It's just a bunch of guys slightly above replacement level. So I don't think this defense can get to league average without Justin Simmons anymore.
All right, well, let's shift it over to our next segment. We've got the fantasy corner, and who are you looking to target in this division?
AFC West fantasy target this year is Josh Palmer with an ADP of 101.5 in Best Ball Mania. We talked about earlier the potential pitfalls in this Chargers ground game, and Jim Harbaugh's no fool. He knows Justin Herbert is the best player on this team, so I think the Chargers might be passing more than people expect this season.
Yeah, and Palmer's shown the ability to earn targets from Herbert. I mean, hauling in 107 during his last healthy season.
Yeah, and with the top 3 target earners from last season out the door, I expect Palmer to get at least 120 targets this season. So even if you think he's going to be the number 2 option in this passing game behind Ladd McConkey, which would be surprising to me, but it doesn't. It does make sense. I mean, that's what the market is saying. He'll be the number 2. The Chargers are expected to score roughly the same amount of points as the Seahawks, Buccaneers, and Vikings. So let's look at their number 2 guys. Jackson Smith and Jigba is going wide receiver 43. Chris Godwin going wide receiver 37. And Jordan Addison going wide receiver 47. Unlike those guys, I think Palmer is a 1A, 1B, and he's going wide receiver 52. I mean, I project Palmer for 120 targets, 1,000 yards, and at least 6 touchdowns.
Yeah, Palmer has been your guy. You've been hammering him at me all off season long. But okay, let's end the podcast with a bet for the people. What do you got for us?
I'm going to take another Charger here because I think this team has the widest range of outcomes in the division. I want to lean into that. So I'm going to take Joey Bosa to lead the league in sacks at 88-1.
Ooh, I like that one. I mean, I think people are sleeping on Bosa because he's played less than 500 snaps in the last 2 seasons combined.
And he's finished top 10 in pressures. Every season he's played at least 12 games. And we know pressures are more predictive of future sacks than any other stat, including sacks themselves. And there's a chance this Chargers defense clicks right away. I mean, we saw the 49ers finish second in scoring in Harbaugh's first season back in 2011. It's a big if, but if Joey Bosa can stay on the field, I think he's more like 25-1 to win the sack title.
No, I love that. I mean, you're getting some crazy odds right there, but I think that will do it for this week's episode, and we'll be back next Friday to preview week 1 of the NFL. So don't forget to check out drbobsports.com. We've got our NFL package as well as the college football package and all of the free analysis there. So as always, thanks for watching, and make sure to like and subscribe.